history of video games, there have been many, many well-beloved series that have graced our screens. Mario, Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy, Metroid, Animal Crossing, Tom Nook, more like Tom Crook, am I right? Bastard. But with all these well-beloved series, there are a number of them that have not gotten as nearly enough attention as they probably should have, due to the lack of US releases. Mother, I'm looking at you. However, the focus of today's episode is based on a not very well-known noble thief character. No, not that guy. The one I'm talking about is a character deserving way more coverage than he really does get, and really deserves a lot more US releases than, well, we've been able to get. And that, my friends, is Goemon. Much like the legends of Robin Hood and Beowulf, Ishikawa Goemon has a lot of different variations on his story. However, there are a few consistencies between them. Number 1, Goemon is always portrayed as a noble thief. Though having sticky fingers, Goemon was never a greedy man. Instead, he tended to steal from merchants, clerics, and even feudal lords to give the wealth to the oppressed peasants. Number 2, Goemon uses a kasiru as a weapon. During the Edo period in Japan, the same time period that the game takes place, weapons were used as a way to show a person's financial status. Since the common folk at the time were prohibited from carrying sharp weapons, they tended to have an elaborate kasiru hanging from their waist. And many metal workers who used to work on decorating swords moved on to create decorative kasiru instead. Now, with me being ex-military, I have a lot of Japanese friends from the time that I spent in Japan. And so I decided to reach out to one of them to see if he could tell me something about the legend. And this is what he had to say. Ishikawa Goemon is one of the famous Japanese robbers. His story is not 100% sure because there's several, and his story has no evidence. All we know 100% sure is that he was sentenced to death and executed by boiling at Riverside in Shinjo, Kyoto, during the middle of the Edo era with his very little son. Side note, there's actually a legend that while he was being boiled, he held his young son above his head as long as he could to try and spare his own son. Also, his whole family members have been executed. Most Japanese baths use boiling gas nowadays, but there used to be boiling water by using wood. And that's how we come to the type of bath called Goemon Buro, meaning Goemon's bathtub. That's all he really knew, but that's still really good information to know about the ongoing series. Now, there have been 23 games in the Goemon series, with 11 other spin-off titles. However, only 5 of them have been released in America. With the first one in the series is Mr. Goemon, which was released only in Japan. And the premise is really simple. You play as Ishikawa Goemon. You must go across all stages while fighting merchants, soldiers, ninjas, and Oni to give the wealth to the people. It's very entertaining, but my favorite part about this game is the sequel to it. Gambare Goemon Karakiri Dochu. Released only in Japan, it is the first game in the series to establish the angled view that we see in a majority of the other games, essentially becoming the new series staple. The gameplay is very simple. Goemon must acquire 3 passes to get through the town gate and gain access to the new area. There are different ways to get town passes, such as secret underground areas, going through a dungeon, or straight up buying them, though the latter can be more expensive. Much like the previous game, Goemon will have to fight off a number of different enemy types, including merchants, clerics, ronin, oni, and tengu. Along with a number of enemies, there are also a number of power-ups you can acquire. These include things like shoes that will increase your speed with each pickup, and a hat that will protect you from falling attacks. The levels vary as well. They aren't always just a flat area. Platforming becomes more prevalent later in the game, with you having to jump across crevices and smaller islands. The area you are able to move can get thinner as well. Instead of almost a whole screen of movable area, you may have only a path to follow and a very limited area to avoid enemies. The Legend of the Mystical Ninja. And here is where most American audiences will recognize the series, because this was the first title that was brought to America. Now the story is kind of weird, but I'm going to do my best to simplify it as best as possible. Goemon and Ebis Maru discover that there have been some disturbances in the area. Along the way, they discover rumors that the Emperor's daughter, Princess Yuki, has been kidnapped, and now they need to go after her. The game changes the scenery up by having different level types. The game goes between the angled view from Gambare Goemon and side-scrolling like in Mr. Goemon. This game has the most enemy variations, and many of them on screen at the same time. It's definitely a great game to play with 2 players, and I highly recommend it. Now before I proceed any further with this video, there is one thing I would like to clarify. I have not played all 23, if you want to consider the other 11, 34 games in the Goemon series. I am only covering a handful of them that I have played and I really enjoyed. However, I am going to continue seeking out the other games, and I will give them a nice fair review as we go on. Eventually, I would like to put together a compilation video that has all 23 plus 11, maybe. Some of them are pachinko games, so I can't necessarily play those, but have them all in order. So I might have a massive video if you guys are interested in that. Now next is Goemon's Great Adventure. Now I know there was a title that came up before it, The Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. However, as mentioned before, 23 plus 11 titles, I have not played them all. However, this is a title for the N64 that I would love to play, and I guarantee you, the next video on the Goemon series that I do, I will have that reviewed. So, stay tuned. Goemon's Great Adventure is a side-scroller much like Mr. Goemon. However, this game has different paths you can take, and many extra missions require you to go down these different paths. This game is displayed in a beautiful 2.5D format. For those of you who don't understand, 2.5D is between 2D and 3D, so it meets right in between. The game has wonderful, beautifully animated cutscenes, and fully voiced dialogue during a couple of the sequences, though only in Japanese and you'll have to read subtitles, but regardless, it's incredible. The game is quite comical and has a fairly simple story. Goemon and Ebis Maru go to visit Wise Man to see his new invention, a machine that can resurrect the dead. As soon as Wise Man unveils it, a woman named Bismaru comes by in her spaceship and steals the machine to resurrect Dochuki, the prince of the underworld. And this series soundtrack is amazing. Seriously, I can't think of another game where I could go, this track's good, this track's good, this track's good, and go over almost the entire soundtrack and say, yeah, I'd say the buttload of tracks that were in here were fantastic. I mean, hell, just listen to this boss battle theme. I have yet to find a game with a more epic or badass boss battle theme. Now, it may seem like I'm fanboying a bit and a little biased about this title for the N64, and honestly, I am. My next door neighbor when I was a kid showed me this, and he was my best friend at the time, and let me tell you, we put countless hours into this game. I tell you, it has such high replay value. Honestly, this is my favorite game in the series. Unfortunately, I've never actually had the chance to beat it. Until now. In the upcoming future, I'm going to be hosting a Let's Play of Goemon's Great Adventure, and you can join me. Let's beat this thing together. The Goemon series has a multitude of titles, and I've only touched on a small handful of them. However, I promise you, I'll be coming back with a part 2, where I'm going to be going over another handful. Overall, the series is quite daring and intriguing. Just give it a chance. It's not going to take long before you get taken over by its charm too. Now, before I go, there is one thing I do need to show you.
Hey Okay, everybody, get ready for the action-packed story of a Game World Guardian. Get ready for the defender of good and despiser of evil. Me, Goemon!
Get on with it.
Huh?
Yes, there was a Goemon anime, actually called The Legend of the Mystical Ninja. And it's very over the top, much like the game series itself, and it's really not that bad. The only thing is, I can't even tell if it's actually supposed to be intended for kids. A lot of the content is actually really questionable. Just take a look at this.
Who in the world are you?
Well, since you're foolish enough to ask, I'll tell you. Of all the evil creatures who stride across the surface of the game world, there is one who out-evils them all. As powerful as he is sexy. And even sexier when he practices his hobby of ritual suicide. I am Seppuku!
Seppuku Maru? Really? Who comes up with this stuff? Like, really, I can't even tell if it's aimed for kids. But regardless, the cartoon is really, really goofy, and it really just encapsulates pretty much what the whole series theme is like. You've got all the characters that show up. The robot Impact, his sidekick Ebis Maru, his friends Sasuke and Yae, they all show up. The plot of the anime actually isn't even that bad. It actually kind of encapsulates the whole theme of Goemon with its goofiness and the kind of person Goemon is. The nemesis from a Goemon video game comes out of the video game through the TV to start trying to take over the real world. Goemon comes out of the game through the TV to track him down and defend the realm of Earth with his new sidekick, a kid who's addicted to playing Goemon video games. I will point out one interesting fact that I still think is really cool about this series. In the very first episode, when you look at the system that the kid is playing the Goemon game out of, it is actually an N64 DD system. For those of you who don't know, the Nintendo 64 DD system, or dual disc system, was, well, just what it sounds like. It's a disc drive for your N64. The way the Nintendo 64 dual disc system worked was actually kind of interesting. See, everybody had access to it, or at least somewhat. If you pull out your Nintendo 64 and you flip it over, there's a slot right here. That's because the Nintendo 64 dual disc drive was supposed to go underneath. And under there, it was essentially like a thick little floppy disk that you plug in. In that episode, when he ejects the disc before he goes to bed, you can see that the kid was playing a game called Goemon on the side of the disc popping out. And honestly, we haven't seen too many Nintendo 64 dual disc drives at all. We have found one American prototype that some guy found, I believe it was at a garage sale of some sort. We found dev kits, but we've hardly found any real games for the dual disc system. It failed miserably in Japan, but it was actually quite ahead of its time. There would have been online connectivity, you would have been able to make your own videos, send video messages, basically game messages, much like how you do with Xbox and PlayStation. It was all right there before, well, we ever saw anything like it. Anyway, that's just a little footnote in video game history. Nothing too much, but it's things like that that I really, really love. I really hope that you go and you check out the Goemon / Mystical Ninja series. It's really a great game, and you can just see that every single game kind of builds up on it with the mechanics. You can pull one mechanic and point it somewhere and go, I know where that came from, or another one and be like, it came from there. Literally every single game since the original game of Mr. Goemon just builds them up. And at least unless you have the weird spin-off titles, but that's for a different video. Anyway guys, I'm Dire Halfling, and I'll see you later.